Hello everyone, this is Jeff with Mississippi in the Civil War. Welcome to the latest episode, a letter from the Vicksburg Siege. And this is the 159th anniversary of the Siege of Vicksburg this year. And at this point, today, when I'm recording this, it's July 18th. The Siege of Vicksburg 159 years ago had been going on for a month already. And it was a very prolonged, very agonizing siege for both sides. And there are literally thousands of letters written and accounts written by the soldiers who participated. But what's harder to find are accounts from the civilians inside of Vicksburg who had to weather the same storm of shot and shell as the soldiers did, but without the ability to fight back. And what I'd like to share with you today is a letter that was actually written during the siege by a civilian inside of Vicksburg, and they somehow managed to get it out, and it was published in a Natchez newspaper, and which makes it kind of unique. There's not a lot of actual on-the-spot civilian accounts. Most of them are post-war reminiscences. So this letter is kind of special. And that's what I'm going to share with you today. And I found this letter written by a civilian resident of Vicksburg during the 1863 siege, published in the Natchez Daily Courier, June 30th, 1863. And as I said before, civilian accounts of the siege written at the time are somewhat rare. I wanted to share it. And I wish I knew how they got this letter out to be published. That's probably a great story in and of itself, but unfortunately the article does not make any mention of how they actually got this account. But this is the letter that was published in the Natchez paper as it was written, and it's headlined Mississippian. Which means it was probably originally sent to the Daily Mississippian, but the Natchez paper got a hold of it as well, or republished it after it was published in the Mississippian. And it states, Republic of Vicksburg, June 13th, 1863. Friend F, and unfortunately we don't know who Friend F is, but Friend F, an opportunity is just offered me through a friend of communicating with the quote, outside barbarians, of which I gladly avail myself. I am not scarred, nor shelled, nor starved out of existence yet, as you perceive, nor even driven to live on worse fare than beef and bread, with the customary concoction of corn coffee. Indeed, no one here is starving, nor any fears of it entertained. The idea of surrender for any cause is never dreamed of here. The hissing abominations flying upon the city in every direction produces a pleasing excitement to aid digestion and break the monotony of our isolation. They fly right and left, up and down, almost incessantly except during the midday heat, which is made up for with renewed vim at sundown. Then they boom loud enough to wake Hannibal or Hugh O'Neill if they slept on this side of the Atlantic. From the enemy's works back of the city, parrot shells are often thrown as far as the river, while simultaneously the mortars from their cover of the woods beyond the peninsula send the bombs and bursting fragments to the remotest ends of our republic. Numerous caves have been constructed in the sides of the hills within the lines by citizens for the protection of their families. Compared with the fury of the bombardment since the investment, the casualties are very small. In the entrenchments, the danger is very little, unless the over-curious, who are, duck-like, giving to popping their heads over the breastworks, which the Yankee sharpshooters purposely pop at, frequently popping their heads over the breastworks, which the Yankee sharpshooters promptly pop at, frequently popping the owner into eternity. Now, whoever wrote this really had a good sense of humor and could turn a phrase. But the tedium and monotony of trench duty is its most disagreeable feature. There is an unceasing din of sharpshooters' rifles kept up daily along the lines, doing little damage. On the riverfront, little of importance has occurred. The boats sometimes shell our batteries at long range from below, none venturing near since we sunk the ironclad Cincinnati on the 27th ultimo. She sailed boldly down under the upper battery, Soon found in a sinking condition, she was put upstream and abandoned. Within an hour, she sunk to the hurricane deck. And that is true. The Cincinnati was sunk with a fairly heavy loss of life: 5 killed, 14 wounded, and 15 missing. And another note: one of the cannon that hit the Cincinnati and helped to sink it was one of the Brooke rifles, which you can see here in the Vicksburg defenses. There were 2 Brooke rifles in the river batteries: a 6.4-inch gun in the appropriately named Brooke Battery, located in the southern part of the city, and a 7-inch gun in Battery 5 in the northern part of the town, which would have been the one firing on the Cincinnati. The Brooke rifle was invented by Confederate naval officer John M. Brooke, and they were produced in 2 locations: the Tredegar Foundry in Richmond, Virginia, and the Confederate Naval Ordnance Works in Selma, Alabama. The fire from the 7-inch Brooke, manned by cannoneers of the 1st Tennessee Heavy Artillery, played a very important role in sinking the USS Cincinnati, as it was holed below the waterline by the 128-pound bolts from the Brooke rifle several times. And the Cincinnati had the dubious distinction of being sunk twice in combat. Even before the Siege of Vicksburg, she was sunk by the rams of the Confederate River Defense Fleet at Plum Point Bend above Fort Pillow. Both times she was raised and put back into service. And the photo shown here is the Cincinnati after she was raised after the Siege of Vicksburg. And this picture was taken probably about August of 1863, when a rifleman's redoubt was added over the wheelhouse. And she ended her active service in Mobile Bay and the Tombigbee River in Alabama in 1865. And the letter just concludes, yours very sincerely, and it just gives the initials of the writer, A.G. And although he was only identified by initials, I can make a pretty good guess as to who wrote this letter. More than likely it was Antonio Janella, who was a very prosperous Vicksburg merchant. Antonio Janella was born in Switzerland, immigrated to the United States as a young man, ended up settling in Vicksburg, and by the time of the Civil War, he had made a literal fortune as a merchant specializing in fine china. On the 1860 census for Warren County, Mississippi, Janella estimated the value of his real estate holdings at $40,000 and the value of his personal estate at $100,000. And just to give you an idea, in modern dollars, his net worth would be somewhere around $3.5 million. So he was an extremely wealthy man. And during the war, Janella did a booming business with the Confederate Medical Department, supplying them with literally hundreds of different items for the hospitals they maintained in the Vicksburg area. And during the Siege of Vicksburg, Janella was able to keep his doors open, but not without some difficulties. The Portland Daily Advertiser of Portland, Maine, noted on July 25, 1863, that, quote, General Pemberton, it is said, refused to allow citizens to draw from the Army stores, insisting that the private stock in the city should be used for that purpose. Mr. Janella, a prominent merchant in this city, being accused of extortion in this matter, publishes a card in vindication of his character. And this is one of the ads from Janella's business dealings with the Confederate Medical Department. This is from the Confederate Citizens File on fold3.com. And after Vicksburg surrendered on July 4th, 1863, Janella remained in the city during the Union occupation. And in fact, the Richmond Enquirer of January 13th, 1864, noted that the enterprising gentleman had managed to reopen his store. To keep his store open during the Yankee occupation, he apparently had made a pretty close business relationship with the city provost marshal. And in fact, some felt that his business dealings with the provost were not entirely above board. In 1865, the Joint Committee on the Conduct of the War issued a report about the activities of the provost marshal in Vicksburg. And one witness told the committee, quote, that the provost marshal of Vicksburg, Wardell, is a thorough secesh friend, that said Wardell sells passes to the rebels to get through the lines, that every storekeeper in Vicksburg has to bribe said Wardell by sums from $500 to $2,000 to carry goods through the lines. One merchant, A. Janella, is Wardell's special protege, that said Janella is a rank secesh, and that before the attack on Vicksburg by General Grant, said Janella offered $5,000 to the battery that may sink the first Yankee cannon boat. And shown in the picture here is actually a fragment from one of the pieces of fine china that Antonio Janella sold in Vicksburg. This was actually dug out of a privy pit in the city, and I was able to purchase it at a Civil War show in Vicksburg some years ago. Just thought it was a neat little piece, since I knew so much about Janella. But Janella was able to weather the criticism. He stayed in business after the war, and he passed away on June 12, 1871, and is buried in Cedar Hill Cemetery in Vicksburg, and has a very, as you can see, ornate monument marking his place of burial. And that brings this episode to an end. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so, because it really helps me gauge interest in the channel and how many episodes I should try and produce. Also, you might want to take a look at the other video that I released today. I'm doing another contest where you, the viewer, can enter to try and pick the topic of my July 4th episode. So if you go to that video and leave a comment and put in your idea for an episode, it will go into the hat, and one of them is going to be chosen, and that's going to be the episode coming up on the July 4th weekend. So please give that a look if you're interested, and thank you very much for viewing.